Hello and welcome back, everybody, to round 3 of the Eternal Tournament Series Last Chance Qualifier. We are about to be getting into a game with Vomii versus the real Platypus. Vomii is going to be on Stonescar Maulers, and Platypus will be playing on an Elysian Shimmer Pack. I'm also joined for round 3 and 4 by my wonderful colleague, aReNGee Loco Pojo.
Hey, welcome. Glad to see everyone here. And yeah, looks like we're getting right into the game. Excited to see a Stonescar Maulers list playing tonight, of course. This is one of my pet decks, so it's always nice to see it. Yeah, and it looks like we're just going to get started here.
Yeah, see a quick redraw to Platypus right there, and we see Vomii also elect to take a redraw.
Stonescar banners in hand, which makes the power base a little bit awkward, but should set up these Champion of Chaoses really, really well. With Seek Power, he'll be able to get a champion on curve as a 4/4, which is just always an excellent play.
Yeah, love the champions coming down as 4/4s, and he did even pick up the Fire Sigil, so he can Seek Shadow with the Seek Power, so he can make it a 5/5 on 4. 5/5 Deadly Overwhelm on 4. That is the fear of the ladder.
It's pretty good stuff, and usually the answer to this is Polymorph. There's no removal in Platypus's hand at the moment, but
yeah, we also noted the deck list actually does not play Polymorph, so he will only have Permafrost to go ahead and deal with this champion, as well as I would imagine Scorpion Wasps. I do believe they're in.
Right. So we have Flame Blast and Statuary Maiden from Vomii at the moment. Looks like Statuary Maiden is probably going to be the next thing to come down. In the meantime, Platypus is just accelerating his power as much as possible, making sure that he gets those guaranteed drops and sets up for that Shimmer Pack or Scouting Party on 6 and 7.
Yeah, this Statuary Maiden coming down is going to pose a huge threat for Platypus's game plan, though. The Scouting Party token's much less effective when they just die and get turned into cudgels.
Statuary Maiden is a very powerful card against Elysian because it's just very, very effective against token removal. Usually after you get the Xenon Obelisk down, you're less vulnerable to mass removal, but Stonescar Mauler's decks tends to have a lot of single target removal, and if you're using that to pick off the little guys and still getting some sort of benefit from the Statuary Maidens, that's really effective. However, Vomii chooses to attack in with the Statuary Maiden, which is exciting and a little bit risky.
Yeah, that is definitely like a risky bit of a play, but we do see Vomii going ahead here and in 5 turns pushing his opponent down to 11. 14 damage in 5 turns, especially with not actually getting anything down until turn 3. Like this is an impressive little start out of him.
It looks like he's going to be able to pressure his opponent out really well, and the fact that he has that Ruin in his hand, which I love, by the way, as a one-of include in the deck, means that he's probably going to be able to generate some surprise damage here.
Oh yeah.
If the block happens against the Acolyte, which is what's going on, the Ruin should take it down, and he'll get a free card out of it.
Yeah, gets a free card, cleans the board up. One of the obelisks is down, 5 damage in. Like this is looking very grim for Platypus already. I mean, the Champion of Chaos is just so hard to block, and if you throw a couple cudgels on it, it's gonna be deadly. And Vomii has the Flame Blast. Actually, he's just holding lethal already.
Yep, with the Flame Blast, this game is over already. So just got a very, very hyper efficient burn hand and pushes through for the game.
Yeah,
that could have gone very differently with the Scouting Party coming down on 6, but Statuary Maiden and Champion just sealed it up. That was no removal from the other side, so
yeah,
well.
Took care of it very cleanly. We will go ahead and take a look at Platypus actually elected not to bring a sideboard for this tournament, so we are going to spend all of our sideboard discussion looking at Vomii's Stonescar Maulers.
All right, well, let's see what we're looking at. He's got the Charchain Flails, of course, and gonna have to see what else is going on. They're having some discussion over the main deck Ruin, of course, which that definitely ruined Platypus's strategy. And it looks like we're going up to 3 Ruins as well. So definitely gonna have a lot of answers to those Xenon Obelisks, which will help out quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, definitely electing to bring them in. Just to give you guys a quick rundown of the sideboard, we do see 2 Ruins, 2 Suffocates, and Annihilate, a pair of Plagues, 2 Death Strikes, 2 Steward of the Past, 3 Infernal Tyrants, and an Azendel.
Yeah, so those Ruins don't have too many targets. There's only the 4 permafrosts and the 4 Xenon obelisks, but the Xenon obelisks are a really important card to Shimmer Pack strategy. They're one of the things that can best shut down a Stonescar Mauler's deck. So I can see the benefit to putting as many as 3.
Yeah, definitely gonna probably see the extra ruins come in here. I have to imagine maybe we'll see some suffocates come in to clean up the early stuff, although it may not be as much of a priority. What do you think about putting Steward of the Past in here? You bringing those two in?
I like the Steward of the Past, but Statuary Maiden does fundamentally the same job. Vomii here has divided his attention between Statuary Maiden and Steward of the Past. And if you're running Statuary Maiden, you have basically the same thing going on. It's just a little bit weaker against certain other types of decks. Against token decks, you always want Statuary Maiden.
Yeah, one of the cards that interacts with Statuary Maiden really well we haven't touched on here is actually Plague. He does have an inclusion of 2 plagues in the sideboard, not too uncommon. And against Shimmer Pack, that may prove to be very useful.
Yeah, it can be really effective. It's especially nice if you've already got answers to the Xenon obelisks. One of the problems with Plague is that, like, even when it is a good card against tokens, there's a Xenon obelisk to make sure that the tokens don't die, and then Plague just sort of ends up weakening the token deck, but not necessarily killing it. But here he's got 3 ruins, and that's more than enough to deal with the Xenon obelisks that come up. He should be fine with those Plagues.
Yep. And we see getting already back into the game. Vomii picking up no creatures here, lacking any sort of gas in his hand, but he does have the Torch, Vara's Favor, and Ruin for some early removal.
Yeah, these early hands full of power can be really effective if you draw into any of your 5 and 6 drops. And Stonescar Mauler's decks are pretty much entirely mid-range, so they do have a lot of drops to play. And he's got Vara's Favors and some small pick-off things to get the tokens, so he might be in okay shape as long as he draws into some gas.
Yeah, I don't think this is bad for him. Like, the start's definitely very it's not slow out of Platypus, but he's building into nothing at the moment. Like, he's got the obelisk, but he's also holding double permafrost, which are lacking targets very notably right now.
And there's already a ruin up for that Xenon obelisk, which is going to make most of these tokens a little less effective and Taler's Favor outright useless.
Yeah, and I have to imagine we'll actually elects not to. Maybe he's going to try and get some of the sweeter combat tricks in later.
Yeah, he seems to be very diligent in holding on to his ruin as a surprise. This is good play from Vomii overall.
Yeah, it's definitely working out much to his favor. He's going to be able to get a lot of sweet trades hopefully in the board, as we saw in the first game.
Might even end up going for the ruins on the permafrost to get across damage with Champion Chaos. Pressuring out a Shimmer Pack deck before it gets to Scouting Party is extremely important for this matchup. So if he can actually get his champion across once or twice, that'd be a pretty good deal for him.
Oh, and this is nice. I think we're going to see the ruin bait here. He's gonna use 1 to take out the permafrost, and then I have to imagine we will be seeing the second one coming down on. Actually, it doesn't need to bother with the obelisk right now. So we still have the Champion of Chaos on the board. Platypus is going to go ahead and drop the Praxis Displacer to force Vomii to lose a turn, putting the Champion of Chaos back into play.
Yeah, this is a better move than the permafrost specifically because it still advances his tempo and he can always permafrost next turn. So it's a nice way to keep pressure on while also preventing the Stonescar deck from getting in for damage. And Vomii here hasn't really pressured for much yet.
Yeah, he hasn't pressured too much, although we may see that change pretty quickly here. We're going to see another permafrost come down, and again, the ruin is going to go ahead and take this off, I have to imagine. Maybe he leans towards taking the obelisk off here, but I have to imagine freeing up your Champion of Chaos is a much higher priority.
Pressing in for damage can be really quite relevant. Those Xenon obelisks are, of course, scary, so if he decides to hit the obelisk instead, that's not a terrible play. It'll set him up for later Plagues, but he doesn't have any of those in hand, so just goes straight for the champion and starts swinging.
Yeah, gonna go ahead and see if the Reinarch wants to get traded here. I have to imagine that Vomii is just going to block with one of the Argent ports and a torch on the way back. If we see the Reinarch push for damage here. Ooh.
Yeah, both players are in decent positions here. Vomii has the double Argent ports, which makes it really effective to use any of his single target removal because he gets a bunch of extra damage as a result. But now that Xenon Obelisk is at 8 power, and it's actually proving to be quite a problem. He's not capable of getting past the Reinarch. He can only sort of pressure for damage here. And he has Stone Scar Maul, which is a very effective card, but it isn't going to help him with that Reinarch. So he's going to need to either pick up a new unit or do something different to just overpressure and deal more damage than Platypus before Platypus kills him with it.
Yeah, interesting. We are going to see Vomii elect to ace base here and see if he can push in all the damage. I'm not necessarily against the play, but I might have liked to have seen the Stone Scar Maul come down first to clean up the 2/4 to guarantee a little bit more damage.
It might have worked out pretty well for him. I think actually that might have been lethal if he did it that way. It's hard to tell for certain. Don't do math on stream, of course. But it looks like with the Crystallize, we're now in a situation where Vomii can clear this up with a Charchain Flail if he needs to.
And he actually wins the game by clearing it with the Charchain Flail, yeah. Argenport. Wow, so Vomii just pushing in for 2 very quick games there. And you know,
that's one of the powers of the deck. It's very good at pressuring out your opponent, and it looks like Vomii managed to succeed both times. So
yeah, it's good. It's a good thing I have you here for this, Loco, since you are much more familiar with the Stone Scar Mauler's deck. Obviously, I'm familiar with it, but I have not played with it nearly as much as you have.
Yeah, it's been our baby for a while. We've definitely been we got to master with it this month as well as I think last month. So it's definitely one of the decks that I use a lot. So it's something I'm fairly familiar with. This deck has a couple of different cards from the list that I use. I like the Ruin. I actually really like the Ruin, and Vomii also clearly likes the Ruin. It being a fast spell is pretty effective. You have that like better just answer to things like Auric Runehammer and other weapons that are going to deal damage to you. And Charchain Flail, of course, is often in the mirror. So if you have Ruin for that, that's a decent way to have like a little bit of extra removal. It's good stuff. You can use it as a trick and get some actual advantage out of it as opposed to just generating a body with Furnace Mage. So really cool bit of tech there from Vomii.
Yeah, Charchain Flail, a very cool card. One I often don't see much of, really, and it's a card that I've definitely learned to appreciate more and more watching these Stone Scar Maulers match up. Like just how useful it is there. Like picking it up there is really useful. Picking it up as like an 8/1 weapon, that was exactly what he needed to clean off the 7/7 Reinarch in that game. There really weren't many other answers in his deck outside of just hard removal to take care of it.
Charchain Flail's primary use is as a just full anything removal spell that costs health. As long as you're playing smartly with it and you're avoiding those torches, you're picking times to play it when no one has power up to play fast spell responses, it can be a really effective removal spell against Aegis units and basically just anything that it'll fit into.
Yeah, I like the card a lot, actually. I'm definitely a lot warmer towards it with the Stone Scar Mauler's deck than I have been in the past. When I first started,
good in those decks because of Smuggler Stash, which allows you to pull it back for just a ton.
Yeah, getting the insane value out of it with the Overwhelm, as we already have learned from the Xenon Killer's Dark Return on Copper Conduit. Those stats do stay permanently into death, and they can just get wildly out of control.
It's a wild amount of fun, and it's good against control lists as well. Of course, like if you're playing against a deck that specializes in unit removal, that can be essentially an extra unit that does an awful lot of damage before somebody can deal with it. It dies to all sorts of things: Torch, Vara's Favor, lots of little incidental damage like Black Sky Harbinger. There's a lot of things that get rid of it, and of course it has a Nombo with Argenport Instigator, where you can just remove the Instigator and ping the Charchain Flail, and you have to watch out for that.
Yeah, definitely have to be careful there not to get it taken away. But yeah, a very solid weapon. Solid card, solid weapon. Does its job. That's basically what we could say about Charchain Flail, is you're going to pay a little bit of health, but you're getting a job done. You pay what you get for it. Or rather, however that phrase would have gone, had I said it correctly.
Yeah, I think if Platypus had had a few more turns in that first round, he got to the Shimmer Pack. The Shimmer Pack had Xenon Obelisk on it. So he could have potentially recovered from that game if he hadn't been killed so fast by the on-curve champ. The deck, like, Vomii got some really good luck with the power drops there and played out his cards perfectly. So I think it went very quickly in his favor at that. And the second game was just a beating. There wasn't really too much that could be done about that.
Yeah, and we were missing some key cards out of the Shimmer Pack deck. Not that they would have necessarily carried the matchup, but let's go ahead and take a look at it quick. Actually, let me go ahead and pull Platypus's list back up. Yeah, like some the Sandstorm Titans obviously were like a big one. We would have liked to have seen them. They definitely could have helped deal with some of the bigger threats in those games.
Yep, Sandstorm Titan will always answer a Champion of Chaos, even if you take some damage doing it. And Marison's Disciple is also pretty effective at that, since you can generate the 1/1 Death Strike, although it often gets killed by incidental damage or by Vara's favor. So
yeah, that's one of those interesting interactions, I think, between the Elysian decks playing Marison's Disciple. Marison's Disciple is one of my favorite cards in Shimmer Pack to play because it gives you so much flexibility, but it's also a test. It's like a test of guessing what your opponent has. Like, do I need to worry about the Varus favor? If he's going to Varus favor, I should get the 3/3 instead of the 1/1. But if he has Torch, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe I'd rather him just throw the Torch into the 1/1 Scorpion.
and if he has a Plague and an Umbra Reaper, then you want the 2/2 Flyer, and other times you just want the meat of the 3/3.
Yeah, definitely. The flying synergy is another one too. Like if you don't have Sandstorm Titans in play, like against Stone Scar Burn, for example, or Stone Scar Maulers, like sometimes you do just need to get that flying unit down.
Yeah, Platypus might have been better off if he'd gotten some of those initiates as well. Being able to accelerate into your like excess stuff, just getting a little bit of a step ahead of the Stone Scar Maulers deck allows you to really capitalize on that card advantage and the power of Shimmer Pack to just basically transform your board and their board into something significantly unfavorable.
Yeah, we never saw the games really get far enough to see Shimmer Pack's main game plan come together. Like we saw the Xena Obelisk come down trying to buff up the tokens, but that wasn't very much. And then we saw the scouting parties come down in those first games, but it was like way too late. And he already had the Statuary Maidens in play to go ahead and clean up the tokens. And obviously, yeah, never seeing Shimmer Pack come up, definitely a problem. Shimmer Pack can hose Stone Scar Maulers and various Stone Scar decks just by turning their deadly units or the Statuary Maidens into more or less, like, it's weird to say that like a 4/4 is useless, but it's a lot more useless compared to the 2/4 deadly Statuary Maiden that's just pumping out cudgels for all your tokens.
Yeah, I think it would have definitely benefited Platypus to have a sideboard here, running in some decays, running in some sort of health gain, anything that gives you just a little bit more time to play around. I'm a big fan of Healer's Cloak. Well, I know that's not necessarily the most popular opinion, but if he could have stalled the game a little bit longer, I think this deck definitely has what it takes to take Scar Maulers down.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that. I don't think Healer's Cloak does get a lot of love, but I think sometimes it's a little unfair that it doesn't get any love. Like it's not a main board card certainly, but it does have those matchups where it's like, oh, I just dropped this on a Titan and gained 8 life back. Now I've got this massive Titan hanging around, big old 7/8 endurance, and yeah, I get that 8 health back, which is very important in some of these matchups. I would have loved to have seen Platypus's sideboard. I would like to see if he makes a sideboard for the next tournament, if he has something like an inclusion of Lumen Defender. I actually really am a big proponent of Lumen Defender and Shimmer Pack sideboards. I love the incidental 5 health gain, and the 1/5 Death Touch body is nothing to just kind of write off.
It's true. It's actually better in Shimmer Pack decks than Healer's Cloak because Shimmer Pack decks have so many low health units. There's less things to Healer's Cloak, and usually don't need to cast that as much. But Lumen Defender is always just a solid card to play down on 5 if you're just trying to live. And it tends to always trade 1 for 1, or at least trade for a very nasty spell of some kind that'd probably kill something else you'd rather keep alive. And sometimes it even stalls out the board completely against things. So yeah, it can be a really effective card in this matchup.
Yeah, very true. The other thing that Platypus is notably lacking due to not having a sideboard, and I actually include a couple of these in my main board normally when I play Shimmer Pack, but we did not see any polymorphs. And polymorph I felt like would have been a huge boon to his game plan. Like the ability to Statuary Maiden is such a frustrating card to deal with as the Shimmer Pack player, because your main source of removal, just permafrosting it and leaving there, doesn't do anything. Like you remove the unit itself, but the effect is still lingering on the board. You need some way to essentially polymorph, just turn it into a different unit, make it the useless frog, and it still keeps its stats if the cudgels are on it, but you at least prevent it from making further cudgels.
Yeah, and we saw Vomii there very smartly sideboarding in 3 ruins against the permafrosts, and that just worked wonderfully. Platypus was trying to keep that Champion of Chaos down, which is another card that's very hard to remove. There's basically 2 removal in blue that work for it, and that's Permafrost and Polymorph, and the Permafrost just didn't stick. He played 2 of them, and both of them got destroyed, so the Champion got to attack in for 5 twice. That's a lot of damage for a Stonescar Burn Mauler's deck to be doing. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think this is why a lot of people have started to give like a little bit of the cold shoulder towards Permafrost. Like, it's a very powerful spell, and I love to play Permafrost, but when best of threes, there are so many things that can take care of it. Like, you've got the Elysian deck obviously isn't playing Silence, but your Rakano list play Silence against Permafrost, and you also have Desert Marshal out of Combry, which can silence it. A lot of silence effects running around. And then once you're playing sideboard games, you have Decay and Ruin that come in out of any deck playing Time or Fire.
Yep, all of that attachment destruction tends to be sideboarded. I really liked the one of in the main board. I like having a little bit of attachment destruction in the main board. In our previous Mauler's list, we've usually done Furnace Mages, but Vomii really demonstrated how a fast spell can actually generate card advantage the same way that a Furnace Mage can, because he was using it to basically as a combat trick, in addition to destroying obelisks, which are a card that you really, really want to get down.
Yeah, you definitely want to get those obelisks off the table. I was very impressed, I have to say, with the one of Ruin inclusion in the main board. Like, it was very impressive to see that fast speed weapon destruction and just attachment destruction being so useful. And I'm wondering if that's more of a benefit of like the tournament scene, because obviously there's a lot of decks floating around the ladder currently that play attachments, but I wonder if that's an inclusion just for the tournament on a hedge, like hedging your bets, essentially. Say, I have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot of attachments in this tournament, so let me just go ahead and pop one in the main board.
Yeah, I'm just noticing now, and this is something about the deck that I hadn't actually seen, but is actually really interesting. There are no obliterates in the Stonescar Maulers list. It is entirely high-end units and Stonescar Maul. I think that's a bold choice, and it's pretty solid. It seemed to have gone pretty well for him.
Wow, yeah, actually, looking over the list myself, yeah, no inclusion there.
Not even in the sideboard.
Yeah, no removal, essentially. Like, he's leaving his removal here to be on the back of the Death Strikes in the sideboard and some of like the Suffocates, and he's floating an Annihilator around. The Torches help pick up the little units as well, but yeah, no Obliterate inclusions, so that's very interesting. Like, it's interesting to see that the deck, he's essentially playing a list that says, I'm not but so worried about pushing damage. Like, I'll leave it to the Umbran Reapers and Soulfire Drakes and the Maul to pick it up. I don't need the burn myself.
Yeah, I've run less obliterates in this kind of list before, and I think it's not bad. It's also allowing him to play those 2 smuggler stashes as opposed to just a one of or something like that, and still get a pretty reliable setup since he's using Stonescar Mauls for the same job as obliterate, and Soulfire Drake, of course. He gets to run 2 Soulfire Drakes and 4 Umbran Reapers at the top, and that's a pretty hefty amount of units that are going to be providing some pressure.
Yeah, it was a good matchup. It was fun to watch. I love Stonescar Maulers. I know you love Stonescar Maulers. Obviously, you're a huge proponent of the deck. As you said, you already climbed to Masters this season with it, so it's definitely one of your babies, if we'll call it that. One of your children.
Take a little inspiration from this list. I like it quite a bit.
Okay,